something is gonna go wrong. I mean, almost every day something small goes wrong or just doesn't go according to plan. Something is gonna go wrong.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Promote the Hell Out of It. My name is Ms. Trujillo, and on the show I chat to people who I think are worth promoting about things I think are worth promoting. Usually I get it right. If I don't, please feel free to let me know. Today's episode is a really special one. I chat to Alexander Travelbum, a YouTuber and travel blogger who has really helped my life personally. Now, I've been traveling for about a year and a half. Alexander Travelbum has been traveling for years, and it was his videos, along with the book, The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, which really helped myself and my partner get out to Southeast Asia and start our journey, put everything in a storage locker, get rid of our flat, and start traveling. So I owe a lot to Alexander Travelbum. He has been all over Southeast Asia. He has lived van life in the States. He has traveled Europe. He has been to places like Romania, Croatia, Hungary, Greece, all over. His videos are wonderful. He teaches you not only where to go in those places, what about those places is so great. He's also got one of the best voices ever. I seriously love the voiceovers he does for his YouTube videos, but he also does really useful videos like how to pack for when you're going traveling for an unknown period of time, like it was that myself and Jane were going. So yeah, basically he is an ace dude. I really enjoyed our conversation and I hope you enjoy it too.
Something is gonna go wrong. I mean, almost every day something small goes wrong or just doesn't go according to plan. Something is gonna go wrong.
Alex, I am really happy to have you on the show. How are you?
Really good, man. How are you?
I'm doing really good. I've been excited to have this conversation with you. I know it's been a bit of a struggle to get the timing down, but that happens when you're on the other side of the world, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's really difficult to stay in contact with people, and yeah, so I'm glad we finally figured it out.
I know. Well, the last time I was in touch with you was about a year ago. I did an interview with you, and it was written. And since then, I've gone traveling to a lot of the places that you inspired me to go to. So thank you so much.
Oh, that's awesome. We really haven't talked about that too much. I'm not even sure about all the places you went, but I'm glad that hopefully it helped a little bit.
It definitely did. So I learned about you on YouTube when I was considering the idea, or I'll rephrase that. I liked the idea of going traveling, but never thought it was really going to happen. And I think the first video that really helped was one where you packed your suitcase. And the reason is because my partner never envisioned that she could actually fit everything into one suitcase and go traveling that lightweight.
Definitely.
What inspired you to keep things so small and so compact for when you went traveling?
So my first trip solo, that's when this really started. I went to Europe for 6 months. So first trip, I knew I wanted to get out there, and I didn't just start out with a 2-week trip or something, like just to test it out. I kind of knew that I would really like it, and so I just made plans to travel for half a year, and I really didn't know how much stuff I would need, and like how do you really pack for half a year or a year when you're gonna have your whole life with you. And I guess I just figured that I needed to keep it really light because I didn't know how I was going to travel, if I was going to be walking from town to town, or I really didn't know the first time. So I kept it as light as possible, as minimal as possible, and that actually really helped out. And ever since that trip, it's been staying the same or even getting lighter. Except with the exception of all my camera gear.
Yeah. I think that's a difficulty that I found. We tried to keep it really compact, but then the camera gear really adds up really quickly. And if you want to start building on that camera gear, you start going, oh man, I'm going to start having to put things actually in hold, and it's going to cost money.
Yeah, that is really a problem. And since I usually travel on a budget and uh, don't have a ton of money to spend on extra room or checking luggage and all of that, I've managed to keep it down a lot.
It's important. Something you mentioned before, that you're continually trying to make it less, and I think it's one of these things that regardless of how little you take, you sometimes find yourselves in situations where you're like, I really wish this backpack didn't weigh as much. I really wish I wasn't carrying as much. And then the stuff that you never use when you take.
There's definitely always the things that you think you're going to need, or you just really want to take it with you because you love that thing or that piece of clothing. But once you're out there, it's like things change a lot once you're there. I mean, it's kind of hard to wear all of your clothing. Sometimes you end up just not caring, or it's too hot where you are, so you just wear the same thing every day. And
Yeah, have you found yourself in a situation where you've left stuff behind because you couldn't be bothered to carry it anymore?
oh yeah, definitely. Especially even my first trip when I didn't know how it was gonna go. I ended up just throwing away half of my bag. Um, and yeah, I continue to do that. If I'm gone for a long time, then you kind of get tired of some of your clothing that you're wearing every single day. And so I'll throw away a couple of those and then maybe buy something new.
Part of the beauty of that is that it's teaching you to be able to live with the minimal amount of stuff, and not even talking about going as far as being minimalist, just actually being able to narrow it down to being happy with what you've got in that backpack and enjoying your surroundings is such an important aspect of being able to enjoy traveling, I found.
Yeah, definitely. And it changes it once you get home. So it's not just for travel, but I noticed once I got home after traveling, or if I took a break and I was living at home again for a year or so, it changes everything. You've realized after that trip that you don't need those things that you had before. And so even at home, I have much less than I used to have.
Yeah.
And it's it's really nice not having a ton of stuff all the time. And like I've moved a couple of times in between traveling, and it's always really easy for me. Like everything I own fits in a small car instead of having to rent a U-Haul or a big truck or something to move everything I own.
Yeah,
It
it's
saves money too.
well, that's the thing. That's the thing, and and it breaks us out of a cycle of consumerism as well, because we're not looking at things in terms of, oh, I want that, because there's just literally no space for it, which I think is really useful because, as you said, that too carries over when you go back home, hopefully.
Yeah, it's really great. It's a unintended effect, something you didn't really think about, but then it happens anyway. And yeah, really glad.
Yeah. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot in preparation for this podcast is one of the things that you mentioned when I did the interview a year ago, and it was about when you're traveling, having to learn to make new friends constantly,
Hmm.
and that to me was definitely something huge whilst traveling. But not only that, the other side of it, having to move on and restart the cycle over and over again. So
Yeah,
in terms of that, what's helped you make friends and be able to continually keep in that mindset?
I, that's always difficult. That's one of the most difficult things about traveling is you're constantly meeting new people, and sometimes you make these really great connections with people, and you'll meet someone who seems like your best friend, or after a couple of days you're best friends and you're with each other for a few days or a week, and then they have to go back to the other side of the world and
Yeah.
you're continuing on or going back home, and you try to keep in touch with them, try to see them again, but sometimes it doesn't always work out. uh, and the same for friends back home, especially if you're continually traveling like I've been doing. It's really hard to keep in touch with people and then have that relationship continue.
Yeah.
So
Is there anything you've managed to put into practice to help that situation?
I've just had to learn how to try to keep in contact with people more. I mean, we live in an age where we have social media, and it's a lot easier these days to keep in contact. So I just make more of an effort than I used to stay in contact with old friends and people that I meet traveling. And that's really all I've found that I can do is just to try to think about it more. And you think about sending someone a message or giving them a call, and a lot of times I would never send that message. I would think about it and then forget about it because you're busy. But now I make an effort, and if I think about it, I'm gonna do it, because I want to keep some of these relationships.
Yeah, I struggle with that for sure. I met a lot of
Yeah.
friends whilst traveling, and it is that feeling of getting back, and it's really weird because you do miss them a lot, but sending that message sometimes gets put off very easily, and
Hmm.
it's building those good habits. But at the same time, I also spend a lot of time working on social media whilst not really loving the effect that social media always has on me, and
Yeah.
not like finding the balance between keeping in touch with everyone and not spending too much time on social media is really difficult.
Oh yeah, definitely. That that's something that I struggle with a lot. I was never a huge person on social media. I didn't do it that much, but now it's basically my job with
Yeah,
YouTube, and I have to do a lot on social media, and then of course keeping in contact with people. So it's as if I have to be constantly every single day keeping up with it, just to get by, keep the business going, keep relationships going, and yeah, it's a lot. It's probably not the best to spend so much time on it, but it's also needed.
exactly.
Without it, we'd probably lose some of these relationships.
Yeah, and in terms of finding the balance in your day to do all the tasks that you need to, and I know, like I can't even begin to imagine how much time goes into all the videos you edit, because I've done shorter ones and it takes me a very long time.
Yeah.
And how do you find time to fit all that in whilst actually enjoying the travels that you're in, whilst actually getting to take these places in and relate to the people and enjoy it properly?
Well, I guess it's a lack of sleep sometimes. um, it's I I've even before this I was never a very balanced person when it came to that. I'm kind of naturally a workaholic. I guess
Yeah.
a lot of people wouldn't think that the YouTube thing and all of that it's work,
No, it
but
is. It is.
but yeah, but it is a lot of work. It's a lot of time, and so I mean, most of the time when I'm traveling, I'll travel all day. I'll film all day. I barely take the camera out of my hand. I just have it sitting there in case something pops up, and then I will try to get my editing done that night, until pretty early in the morning, and then do it all over the next day. So there there isn't really a healthy balance right now.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Sometimes it's the best way. If you're enjoying it, it does take a while to find a balance, because obviously, although you're enjoying it, it's that push of making it work as well. So you've got double the fuel there.
Yeah, yeah, it takes a lot out of you, but if you enjoy it, and I love it, I love what I'm doing, and I it's a lot of work and a lot of time, but I love the work, I love the travel, so I just love all of it. So if it takes my whole day, my whole night, then I'm gonna do it, and I'll lose some sleep, and maybe it won't be completely that healthy to spend all the time doing it, but I'm totally good with that right now.
Yeah, I get that. I get that completely. So, in an ideal situation, when you're spending that much time traveling and on transport, you'd get a lot of the work done in that situation. Does that work for you? Because that never works in my case.
You mean getting things done while
on a plane, on a train, in any of those situations, any of the editing, anything like that?
Uh, yeah, I try to do that, but the problem with me is there's something about planes and trains and just the white noise and the vibration of the plane or the train. It makes me fall asleep right away.
No.
The
Ah,
second
seriously.
I get on a plane and it won't even be taking off for an hour and I fall asleep right away.
I'm
And
very jealous of you right now. Incredibly jealous.
I know I've been very lucky that I have that problem, if it's a
Yeah.
problem. I mean, for me, it is kind of a problem because I get my laptop out, I get everything set up, I'll start editing, but I fall asleep right away every time. So, yeah, it doesn't really work for me.
Well, yeah, I've got the opposite problem. I get on the plane, I take a load of like sleeping pills, I'll get a comfy pillow, take everything ready to sleep, and then 19 hours later, I'm still wide awake, unable to sleep. Which isn't great for your immune system when you've got to then adapt to a new country and a
Oh,
new
yeah.
diet, right?
Yeah, definitely. But that is great if you have a lot of work to do. I kind of wish I had that
Well,
sometimes.
I wish, but like the other side of that is that I can't work either because I'm so tired by the fourth hour of this
Mm.
situation that I
Yeah.
can't get any work done. I don't even trust myself to get any work done.
Yeah, because the quality might suffer because you're so
Absolutely.
tired, but just pushing through it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know how that is.
It's one of these situations about traveling where you've got to learn to be uncomfortable when with the actual travel aspect of it sometimes.
Definitely. I mean, that's a big part of travel. That's something that I like actually about travel is that you're uncomfortable a lot of the time, and when you're home, usually that's not really a problem most of the time. And I think people grow from that discomfort. The more you have to go through it, the more you appreciate it when you are finally comfortable again.
Yeah. And if you think of those situations you've put yourself in, are there any uncomfortable situations that stand out to you from your time traveling?
Well, obviously, there's a lot because I feel like you're constantly uncomfortable traveling, but uh, the one that comes to mind for some reason is when I was in Myanmar, I had this bus trip where it was supposed to take, I believe, 5 hours, and it ended up being a 30-hour bus trip, and it was not a comfortable bus. There was no AC. It was full of people. There was no bathroom, no nothing, and we were just stuck. We somehow, I still don't really understand it, but we were going through the hills, and there was just a huge traffic jam, and we just got stopped in the middle of nowhere for 20 of those hours we didn't move.
No.
So we had to sleep somehow on the bus sitting up, and no bathroom, so people were just leaving, going into the forest and trying to do their business like that. And I was very thankful that at that point I had just gotten over kind of a little bit of a stomach issue, which happens sometimes in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, very thankful that I actually made it the whole way without having to do that when a couple days before I was using the bathroom 20 times a day. But yeah, that was very uncomfortable. And we had no food, no water, nothing.
Is there anything you can say you learned from that situation? Anything where you can see how it helped you grow to try and put a positive spin in even the direst of situations?
What we ended up doing, I met uh, two French guys on that, and we actually became really good friends because of that situation. We only had each other really to talk to because the rest were locals and they didn't speak any English. And after the 30 hours of being stuck there, we grabbed our bags and we just started walking. We left the bus and then we hitchhiked. So we hitchhiked a little bit, and I hadn't had that experience in Myanmar, and that was a lot of fun. And I got to film a video with that whole experience. So we ended up having a really good day after one of the worst days of our lives, and made some really good friends. So that came out of it. And also I started realizing, like, before we did that, I was having obviously a really horrible day, and I was very angry about the situation. But then I was looking around the bus and just looking at the locals, and there were people with really small children. There were a couple babies, and it got cold at one point, and some people didn't have jackets because they didn't think they would need them. And I just looked at these other people and realized that I had it much better than them, or much better than a lot of people on the bus, who had to be somewhere by a certain time and they weren't getting there, or had families to get to when I had nothing specifically I had to get to. So uh, that made me appreciate just the situation and how it can be a lot worse for other people. And I wasn't as angry after I realized that.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's the reason I promote travel so much, because it is situations like that that make you appreciate the world and treat people generally in a different way, because
Mm-hmm.
they have a huge impact on us as human beings, I think.
Yeah, exactly. That's definitely something that most people learn traveling. It's like the longer you're out there, you know that something is gonna go wrong. I mean, almost every day something small goes wrong or just
Yeah,
doesn't go according to plan. Uncomfortable situations, and sometimes even worse. Yeah, it's just things that don't usually happen at home. And so once you get home and everything is easy again, you can really appreciate it after living in that way.
so true, so true. One of the things you mentioned last time I asked you some questions was that regardless of the safety or the considered safety of places that you may have visited, you've never really had anything terrible happen. Is that still the case?
Yeah, yeah, that's still the case. I guess I've been pretty lucky.
Well, last time you mentioned that you didn't call it luck, and I'd personally agree with that after having gone to those places, because I think that not only is it a case of how you react in those situations, but also a case of the countries and the places sometimes not being as unsafe as they're made out to be.
Yeah, definitely. That's a huge thing. I think, especially like lately, I've been looking into traveling in Central and South America, and most of the times when I bring up some of these countries, people think they are the most dangerous place, and that right when I get there, something really horrible is going to happen,
Yeah,
and you should not travel to anywhere, not even the touristy destinations in these countries. They're just considered dangerous countries. And then I see, because I do a lot of research and I watch YouTube videos and all of that, I I see families and children and all these people traveling to places like Colombia and Mexico and places like that, and they're just walking around with their cameras, completely safe. They're saying everyone they're meeting is nice and it's totally safe, and you should travel here too. And then people like my parents and friends, they'll say that it's dangerous, and I don't know what I'm talking about.
yeah,
But I've noticed that with everywhere I've been. Um, Even in Southeast Asia, I mean, that's considered more of a safe place to travel, but a lot of people who haven't been there, they think that it's still dangerous or that something will probably happen. And I don't know, the more research I do, and the more places I go, I realize that these places are not dangerous. Things happen sometimes, and that's what people hear about. And that's not true for vast majority of the world, actually.
yeah, yeah. I find sometimes it's also putting things into perspective, because in England, for example, or in Spain, where I lived for a while, or in the States, we're talking about other countries and their safety without always contemplating the safety of the country we live in perspective.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting. The UK, and I think pretty much every country, has a government website where you can check to see the level of threat of of going to visit another country. And you look at some of the countries in Southeast Asia and it's like, oh, incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
But then you go on another country that isn't your home country and you look at England, the States, or Spain, or France. And generally, they're pretty high up there in dangerous countries to visit with high threat of attacks and high threat of pretty much everything.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, I'll read that a lot of places in the United States are more dangerous than many other places in the world. And people that live there, all my friends and family, they would never think that the US was dangerous at all. Like, we live in the safest place ever, and everywhere else outside of the US is dangerous. And that's just not true
No.
at all.
Everyone says that taxi drivers are going to rip you off in Thailand, in Vietnam, in Malaysia. And my experience was the complete opposite. We had taxi drivers give us money back because we'd overpaid in Vietnam. We never had an issue with any of the taxi drivers in Thailand. Everyone was super polite. And I'm not sure if that's because of how we were approaching the situation or just because it's a downright myth.
Yeah, sometimes I'm not sure either. I think things do change if you've traveled a good amount, or like it probably changes based on you, how you're acting around them. And I think as someone who continuously travels, you might know a little bit better how to interact with the locals, and I think they can see that. So if you're completely a tourist and you never leave your home and you're acting like a tourist, they might try to rip you off a little more.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I wonder if it's that or a combination, because I've also come across kind of the same thing that you're saying. Either either a myth, or they look at you, they hear you, and they know that you're a little more well traveled, and so they don't see you as so much of a target.
Yeah,
I don't
agreed.
know.
Agreed. I also like to think, and I might be completely wrong here, but I like to think that people can tell that you're trying to be kind and treat them with respect, because
Yeah,
I saw a lot of tourists who didn't treat people with respect and were very much treating it as if they were on a holiday and could afford to do whatever they wanted. So I think hopefully it's refreshing for locals to be treated with respect and said hello to in their own language and things like that.
yes, exactly. That's the other part of it that I wanted to mention. Um, exactly what you said. And like I would always hear in France or in Paris that Parisians that Parisians are rude to travelers, or they're just rude people. Um, and I think a lot of Americans, or a lot of people, just they travel to Paris. So I've heard this many times from tourists. But then I went there, and everyone I met was really nice. But then I remembered that I did try to learn a little bit of French. I tried to say hello in French and tried to be nice and smile and all of that. And then you go around the corner and you see a group of tourists being really loud, and they
Yeah.
really don't seem to care about what they're doing. They're not looking at anything around them. They're just, I don't know. I think that's probably a big part of it too.
It's funny because some of the worst situations I saw were from, unfortunately, British people whilst traveling, and the worst that comes to mind was a couple who were incredibly drunk in Vietnam and smashed a shrine of the locals, and then decided that it was the best idea to run away. Which is incredibly upsetting when you consider the whole situation and what goes into it, and just a little tiny bit
Yeah.
of research about their culture, like hopefully would have made them show respect.
Yeah, I've seen similar things, and yeah, I'm not sure again if it's something that we're noticing more because we notice people that are from where we're from,
Yeah,
but I notice the loud Americans, stereotypical loud tourist Americans. Uh, I guess the same for British, Canadians, Australians, but they do seem to be a lot of times the loudest and maybe the most disrespectful in some situations, and that is sad to see because it gives you a bad name as a tourist, and I wouldn't want tourists there either if people were acting like that.
Well, that's the reason I mention it. It's not to turn it into a negative sort of smashing at tourism, because obviously that would be
Yeah.
ridiculous coming from tourists.
Yeah.
And I met a lot of respectful tourists whilst traveling who became my friends.
Definitely.
It's more a call to anyone listening to remember to be respectful whilst traveling, because it makes it easier for everyone else.
Yeah.
So one thing I did want to ask you in relation to everything we've just talked about, where was the place where you felt safest whilst traveling?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's always easy to travel in English speaking countries because you know what people are saying and everything. And when I'm thinking about it that way, English speaking countries, say, been to England, Ireland, and for the most part, I feel very safe and I know what people are saying because they're speaking English. So,
Yeah, no, that's really, really interesting, because obviously a lot of this, and it's kind of where I was leading up to, is based on very much the experiences we've had in those places. Like, if someone goes to anywhere in the world and gets pickpocketed, they're not going to have felt safe in that place, regardless of how rare it is to get pickpocketed there.
yeah.
For me, for example, a city like London puts me on edge way more, say, than a city like Hanoi, which sounds ridiculous, but walking around after 12 o'clock in Hanoi, I felt way safer than I did in most streets in London.
Yeah, and that there might be a good reason for that. I mean, it might be more dangerous in London at night. That could be true. I'm not sure.
I mean,
So,
I'd argue it is true, but that's a whole long conversation that would
yeah.
that would need statistics behind it and stuff. But I would definitely say that there's a difference in the culture in the places.
Yeah. I guess yeah, that question is kind of hard to answer because also, yeah, I've been to Hanoi and I did feel very safe there. So, it's really hard to choose. I was just it's it's nice to know what people are saying because sometimes if they're speaking a different language than you don't know if they're like something in the back of your mind might think that they're saying something
Yeah,
negative or
yeah,
somebody's walking behind you and yelling at you and in a different language and you think that maybe they're coming after you or they're
yeah.
trying to take advantage of you or rob you when really they might be saying something really nice and you just don't know. And so it's not really unsafe, but maybe uh, a confusing feeling. You don't really know what to think. So I guess that's what I was going off of. But I felt safe in almost every country I've ever been to.
I think that's the takeaway, personally, for me, is that, as I said, it's all down to perspective, and that means that there's no
Mm-hmm.
reason not to visit somewhere new. And obviously, I'm not saying not to check what's going on in countries and be sensible and look at the news and stuff. So I wanted to touch on van life for a little bit, because it's
Mm-hmm.
something that really appeals to me. Is it something you would recommend trying out to other people?
Definitely, it was some of the best times of my life were in that van. I want to do it again. I just have so many places I want to go in the world and so many things to do. So it's hard to choose what to do, but that's definitely something that I'm going to do again. It's just it's a different way of traveling. I mean, I've backpacked many times and also traveled out of a suitcase and having your home with you, having your bed with you constantly and having well it depends how you do it, but I had a fridge, I had solar so I could charge my phone up at night and charge my computer. I had a room with me wherever I went. And so there are a lot of benefits to that. You could take a nap in the middle of the day if you want to.
Yeah, it
Uh,
sounds like luxury after backpacking.
yeah, it's very easy in a lot of ways like that. You don't have to pay for accommodation at night. You already have it all the time. So
Yeah.
For a budget, it's really great once you have it. Once you've paid for the van, you're spending a lot less because you don't have to pay for transportation besides gas and accommodation. So that's really great.
As you mentioned, budget-wise, it works out well day to day. But in terms of actually paying out for that van, like up front,
Mhm.
does that work out cheaper than say going traveling around Southeast Asia for a year?
I guess that depends on many things. Depends how much you're going to spend on the van and how long you want to do it for. I mean, so let's just say my van, uh, my van costed $5,000 for my dollars USD for my van, and then another two maybe to convert it. So there's $7,000, and I traveled in it for around a year.
Yeah,
And if you're going to travel in Southeast Asia, like, kind of how much that costs. But
yeah.
for me, it was around $500 a month. So I don't know. It works out either way. It depends what kind of traveler you are.
And I guess the extra cost is like what you said. You've got a lot more comfort there than you do when you're backpacking as well.
Yeah, and I guess it depends where you want to travel. So, like, if you want to see the United States, I think it's the best or maybe even the only way to do it because things are expensive in the United States and it's really big country.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get to everything. Everything's really spread out. And so to pay uh, a, for buses or flights or something to get everywhere, and then hotels, even the really crappy hotels in the middle of nowhere, they're still usually $100 a day, a night, or something like that. So for the U.S., it is definitely the way to go, and you would make your money back by doing it in a van.
I think that's great advice. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Aren't those hotel prices a slap in the face after you get back from Southeast Asia,
Yeah, everything is.
eh? Yeah.
Once I got back home, I didn't want to pay for anything. Every time I wanted to get food, it was too much.
Before going out, we'd been living in Barcelona, and we'd put everything in the storage locker. So on the way back, we've been pet sitting for the past 6 months or so, and we've got another 6 months booked in. So we're traveling around the UK looking after pets and staying in accommodation for free, which I highly recommend, and I will send you links to
Is
after.
that trusted house sitters or is?
Yeah, through trusted house
Oh,
sitters. Yeah,
cool.
yeah. It's been an absolutely amazing experience, and we're hopefully going abroad with it next year. Fingers crossed if everything goes all right. But we'd booked 2 weeks in Barcelona, just as a mini holiday back in Europe when we got back.
Hmm.
We really shouldn't have because those 2 weeks in Barcelona cost like 2 months out in Asia, and it was
Yeah,
so depressing.
yeah. Sometimes just like 2 or 3 days somewhere can cost the same as a month in Asia,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's hard to do. Once you've been there, it's hard to do almost anything.
Yeah. So in terms of what you're hoping to do next, any plans that you can share with us, or anything, even if it's a rough sort of idea?
Yeah, I'll give you my first few months. So pretty soon, maybe in 3 weeks, I think. I haven't gotten the flight yet, but I'm working with this company called World Packers, and it's basically a platform for volunteers volunteering around the world for a place to stay, that kind of deal. And they reached out to me, and they're paying me um, a good amount, a decent amount, but also paying for my round trip flight to go to Central America. And they just want me to make a couple videos about my experience and promote the idea of volunteering. And so I think I've decided that I'm going to Costa Rica. There was a good opportunity there.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I'll probably go to Costa Rica for a week to volunteer, and then another week I'll just travel around. And then after that, my plan is to go to India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, possibly Nepal, and just that whole area, probably for a few
Nice.
months.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah,
Uh,
pretty excited.
how do you deal with choosing where to go next? And how do you deal with not wanting to just go back to the same places that you loved the first time?
It's really tough. Actually, just last night I made a list of everywhere I want to go. I was kind of trying to plan out my next year, and I
Yeah.
just have a huge list. I think there's 60 countries on there, and this is a list that I'm actually trying to do in the next year or two. And
Amazing.
it, yeah, it's hard because there's kind of a mixture in there. Like I haven't been to India and all of that, and I've really wanted to do that. So that's the first thing that I'm gonna do. But after that, I probably will go back to Southeast Asia to a couple of my favorite countries over there, which would
Nice.
be Philippines and Vietnam most likely. So yeah, kind of a mixture. After that, I'll do something new again, but I'm not just doing it to cross countries off the list and try to visit everywhere and say that I've been everywhere in the world. So I I'm totally fine going to places that I've already been that I really want to see again or that I miss some of the best things there. So
Yeah. And I think that's really important in terms of keeping travel something that you love, in terms of not getting bored, not forcing yourself to do something that you actually don't want to do. I found that sort of 7 months into traveling Southeast Asia, we were starting to get a bit tired of moving around constantly,
yeah,
and we decided that as opposed to going somewhere new, we'd go back to Hanoi that we'd really liked, and we spent pretty much a month hanging out in Hanoi, going to our favorite bars, making loads of friends, and that actually gave us the energy to stay out another 2 months instead of coming back when we'd felt tired.
yeah, yeah, that's a great way to do it. I think a lot of people, like I just said, they just like to uh, add a lot of countries to the list so they can say that they've been to many countries. But I think it's much better to stay somewhere for at least a week or two and really get to know it instead of just being there for a day or two to kind of cross off the tourist destinations or the really good Instagram photos. And because the things usually that you remember forever, they're the places that you spent more time, at least for me.
So true. And it's funny because some of the places that I remember the best, it's for the people that I had interactions with, and not sometimes for the views that I thought I was going for, which is a very bizarre thing when I think back on my journeys. There's some temples I was so excited about seeing, and just some views that I'd built up in my head that I always wanted to go and see. And don't get me wrong, they're incredible, and it was so worth the trip in that sense as well. But my memories often are of the little interactions I had with people.
Yeah, travel surprises you that way. I feel like that happens a lot, and that's probably why people shouldn't really plan out their trips so much because
Yeah,
you see a few things when you research and you know a few places you want to see, but those aren't necessarily the best things. Once you get there, you discovered hidden gems or people even that you meet, and once you look back on it a year or two or three later, sometimes you don't even really remember those sites except for a picture or two that you have, but you remember the people or
yeah.
a small restaurant that you went to where the meal was really great just in the middle of nowhere. And yeah, I think people should plan a little bit less and just let travel take you where it's going to take.
I'd pretty much planned uh, moving around every 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, we're going to get to this place, we're going to stay there for 3 days, and we're going to go to the next place. And I had this whole route in my head based on when the cheapest flights were from place to place, what the cheapest coach journeys were. And I think we were in Thailand for 2 days before the whole plan went to shit and we did something completely different.
Yeah, yeah, that usually happens. And sometimes if you book everything in advance and you've put a lot of money up front, then you can't change those plans. And you might meet someone you really like a lot and they're going to go somewhere new and somewhere that you hadn't heard of. They tell you about it. You really want to go there, but you've already booked a hotel at the next place
Exactly.
for $50 and you can't change it. So I always tell people maybe book the first day or two, or book the things
Yeah.
that you really need to in advance. But besides the first day or two, as far as like accommodation, I like to leave it open after that.
That's exactly what we did, and I think it may have been based on some advice you'd given on one of your videos, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
But we'd booked in 3 days in Bangkok, and we'd booked in somewhere that was nicer and higher budget than we were generally going to be staying in the rest of the time, just as a way of recovering from jet lag and getting to grips with being somewhere else.
Yeah.
And we didn't have anything else booked in. We were like, we'll book it in when we get there. And it was definitely the best decision we made, because we were able to, like, when we were in Penang, we met people who owned a bar there who invited us out the weekend after, so we extended the trip, and you've got that flexibility.
Yeah, I think that's really the best way to do it. I mean, usually if you're traveling in a plane or traveling for several hours, you probably do want to have that first thing booked just so that it's easy to
Yeah.
get in there, set your stuff down, and make a plan. But other than that, you should be available to do what you want and change everything.
Yeah. One of the things I did find tough, and that I from now on tell people to check, is sometimes you'll catch a flight and it will arrive late at night and it's in the middle of nowhere,
Mhm.
and it's very easy to forget that it's in the middle of nowhere and not make any plans, banking on it being like, say, Singapore or Bangkok or somewhere like that, and that really did screw us over a couple of times. So,
Yeah,
so it is things like that that you learn after the first few mistakes.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, there is a lot to learn. Usually, that's why people who go on trips for just 2 or 3 weeks, uh, it usually takes a week to really get into travel. You start making your mistakes early, and then maybe by a few days in, or 3, 4, 5 days in, you've made enough to mistakes to where you can finally travel and kind of know what you're doing. So that goes the same thing goes for a place, I think, which is why I think people should try to spend more than 1 or 2 days in a place, because you just you need time to learn about that place, to be there before you can really take it
How
in.
often do you find yourself staying in a place? Like, how long do you spend there generally before you get the itch to go somewhere new?
Well, if I can, I like to stay somewhere at least 3 days. But some places,
Yeah.
they don't have that much there. They only have a couple things to see, and so maybe I will pass through there. But after I've done a couple of those quick sightseeing places, I'll like to get to a destination where I can spend 3, 4, or 5 days and
Yeah.
start living there a little bit.
Yeah.
And if I really like a place after a few days, I love to stay somewhere for 2 weeks or so.
Is there anywhere memorable you've stayed for an extended period of time?
But yeah, actually, the one of the first places I ever went to as a solo traveler was Naples, Italy, and I didn't know that I would like it so much. And a lot of people probably haven't been there and probably don't think much about it, because uh, what I heard before I went there was it's dirty, the mafia, it's dangerous, all of that stuff. But you get there and it's a really interesting place, and it's different than anywhere else in Italy. And I also had my first couch surfing experience there, and still to this day it remains the best couch surfing experience I ever had. The woman I stayed with, she was the nicest, most giving, caring woman ever, and it was just amazing. So I ended up staying there for uh, over 3 weeks, and I thought I would only be there for 3 days. Yeah, because of that experience, Naples is one of my favorite cities in the world. So, like we were saying before, it's when you stay somewhere for a little longer, usually those are
Yeah,
the places that you really remember.
absolutely, absolutely. You build connections, and it's what we said before as well, that it's all in perspective. All right, so to start wrapping things up, I just want to get some quick fire questions for you. Top travel tip for any of our listeners?
Typically, my top tip, especially because I'm a budget traveler, is to try couch surfing. Mostly because it saved my life, saved my first trip, saved me so much money, and you get to meet locals and make really good friends. I love it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Right, number one place to head to if you haven't traveled much before.
If you haven't traveled much, I'd say Thailand is a good start.
Number one food to avoid in Thailand.
Number one food to avoid? Uh, well, there isn't a specific food. How do I say this? I would say don't avoid the street food because you have to try it, but also do avoid it because you'll probably get a little sick. Not really sick, but you'll get something most likely.
Yeah. I avoided the scorpions. I didn't go for the scorpions. I stayed away from that.
Yeah, I did too.
Wasn't feeling comfortable. Awesome. Well, Alex, I've really enjoyed chatting.
Yeah, me too.
Would you like to do a bit of a plug for your channel? I will obviously link to everything underneath.
Sure. I mean, my channel is called Alexander Travelbum, and I make YouTube videos for the most part, but you could also find me on social media at the same name. My travel videos are usually kind of an ongoing story of my travels, kind of like vlogs, but also tips and informative videos on how to travel on a budget and things like that.
Amazing. And I can obviously vouch for them because I wouldn't have got out there if it wasn't for your help, and I would have definitely made a lot more mistakes. So thank you for all the hard work you've done on those videos.
That's awesome. Thanks. I'm always glad to hear that when I help someone a little bit to travel better, cheaper, longer.
Cheers. Right, well, we will catch up soon. Yeah, Alex, thank you.
All right, thanks for having me, man. Something is gonna go wrong. I mean, almost every day something small goes wrong. It just doesn't go according to plan. Something is gonna go wrong.
Thank you so much for checking out that episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to hear your feedback. What should I be doing more of? What should I be doing less of? What do you want to hear more of? What do you want to hear less of? What kind of guest should I have in the show? It's all go. Send me a tweet, send me an Instagram message, send me an email. I will try and listen to your feedback and put it into action. I absolutely loved having Alexander Travelbum on the show. As I've already mentioned, he's been a huge inspiration to my life, and I hope that you find the same for you too. Please check out his links below, check out his YouTube channel, and be inspired to travel the world. If you did enjoy this episode, there's loads more to check out. There's loads more that you can check out, and I hope you enjoy those too. Catch you soon.
Something is gonna go wrong. I mean, almost every day something small goes wrong. It just doesn't go according to plan. Something is gonna go wrong.